Sophia Stone had always been a skeptic. A woman of science, her life revolved around facts, numbers, and cold, hard reality. She was a journalist by trade, covering everything from local politics to scientific breakthroughs. But when the object crashed into her family's farm on the outskirts of town, her worldview was about to be shattered. It was a warm autumn evening when Sophia's life turned upside down. The sky had been clear, with only a few wisps of cloud. She had just wrapped up her latest article, one about new climate change research, when the sound of something tearing through the air shattered the silence. It was a sharp, high-pitched whine, like nothing she had ever heard before. She rushed outside to investigate, heart pounding in her chest. What she saw defied all reason. The object was small, only about the size of a large car, but it was glowing with an otherworldly blue light. It had no wings, no tail, nothing that would make it aerodynamic in any conventional sense. Yet it descended slowly, as if gravity didn't apply to it the same way it did to other things. The small craft landed with a soft thud in the field behind her house, kicking up a cloud of dust. Sophia froze, torn between running for cover or investigating. Her instincts as a journalist overpowered any sense of caution. She took a few tentative steps forward, keeping her distance, but her curiosity drove her closer. Then, as if guided by some invisible force, a hatch in the side of the craft slowly opened, revealing a figure silhouetted against the soft, flickering glow of the ship's interior. It was a man, or something that looked very much like one. He stood tall, dressed in strange, metallic armor that shimmered with iridescent colors. His features were sharp, angular, and almost too perfect to be human. His skin, a pale shade of blue, glowed faintly, as though it was absorbing the light around him. His hair, long and silver, caught the fading light of the evening sun, almost glowing in contrast. But it was his eyes that captivated Sophia the most. Eyes that were not quite human, but not entirely alien either. They were a deep shade of violet, like a stormy ocean at night, and they were focused entirely on her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Sophia's breath hitched as she tried to process what she was seeing. Her heart raced, and her mind spun with 1,000 questions, none of which seemed possible to answer. The figure took a cautious step forward. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, though it had an oddly melodic quality to it, as if he wasn't entirely accustomed to Earth's atmosphere. "Are you human?" His voice was smooth, yet strained, as if speaking the word took great effort. Sophia nodded, her mouth dry. She had never been one for many words when caught off guard, and this was a situation that left her completely speechless. "Yes, I'm human," she said slowly, her eyes never leaving his. He seemed to consider her answer, his gaze flicking to the sky, then back to her. "I am not from here." That was all he said before his eyes softened, a look of both relief and sadness washing over his face. It was clear to Sophia that he was struggling with something. But before she could ask any more questions, his expression hardened, as if he had remembered something important. "I need help. My name is Thaler, Prince of Zelaris. I have fled my world to escape a terrible fate." His voice trembled slightly, betraying a deep sorrow that Sophia couldn't ignore. Sophia, still in shock, nodded again, her instincts urging her to trust him. "I can help you, but what do you mean? What are you running from?" Thaler's gaze darkened. "My pursuers are close. If I do not hide my true identity, they will destroy everything I care about, everything I am." For the first time, Sophia felt a deep, unexplainable pull toward him. It was as if a part of her soul recognized his pain. But she didn't know if it was sympathy or something more, something dangerous. The next words he spoke sent a chill down her spine. "I must remain hidden, for both our sakes." As the alien prince, Thaler, looked into Sophia's eyes, he seemed to know that she would be the one to protect his secret. He had to rely on her. His survival, and perhaps more, depended on it. But in that moment, Sophia had no idea what she was about to become entangled in. A cosmic game of cat and mouse was about to begin, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about the universe. Thaler's presence felt more real than anything she had ever known, dangerous, yet magnetic. And she, for reasons she couldn't explain, couldn't walk away. She had to know more. To help. But what would happen if she did? The seeds of a story that would change the course of both their lives had been planted. But the seeds of danger and deception were growing fast, and they would soon become entwined in a way neither of them could escape. Sofia led Thaler inside her farmhouse, away from the prying eyes of any passers-by. She kept glancing back at the glowing craft, still half expecting it to vanish as if it had been a mirage. But Thaler was real, and the weight of his presence filled the small house in a way that unsettled her. It was as if something, some force, had connected them, a bond she couldn't explain. She couldn't put it into words, but it was undeniable. Her mind raced as she pulled out a chair for him at the kitchen table. She offered him some water, still unsure of what to say, of how to process this bizarre turn of events. Thaler accepted the glass with a slight bow, his fingers long and delicate as they wrapped around the cool surface. He didn't drink right away, though. Instead, he stared down at the water, his violet eyes reflecting something deeper, something she couldn't quite read. Sofia took a seat across from him, her heart pounding as the silence stretched between them. "You said you re from Zelaris," she began, breaking the quiet. "But where is that? I've never heard of it." Thaler's lips quirked up in what might have been the faintest of smiles, though it was overshadowed by the exhaustion and sadness in his eyes. "Zelaris is not within your galaxy. It is beyond your star system, beyond the reach of your telescopes. It is much further than you could ever imagine." Sofia stared at him, her mind reeling. "Wait, so you're saying you're not just from another country, you're literally from another galaxy?" His eyes flickered with something like amusement. "Correct. My world is a distant one, and it is not the only one. I come from a lineage that is ancient, noble, but also cursed. My family has long been in conflict with enemies who would do anything to seize control of our power." Sofia leaned forward, her journalistic instincts taking over. "Enemies? You mean, there are others from your world here? On Earth?" Thaler's face darkened. "Not just from my world. There are beings who traverse the universe, who seek to control. They are not human, not by any measure. And they are relentless." He sighed deeply, as if the weight of his truth was too much to bear. "I was supposed to be married to a woman of my own people, to unite our planets and bring peace to our war-torn worlds. But I fled, seeking refuge on this planet. I had to escape. They were going to force me into a life I could not live. The pursuit, the constant danger, it would have consumed me." Sofia's heart went out to him. There was such a vulnerability in his voice, in the way he carried himself. It was hard to reconcile this fragile, haunted man sitting before her with the powerful prince he claimed to be. But something in his words didn't sit right with her. "Why Earth? Why here?" Thaler looked up, meeting her gaze. His eyes softened, and for the first time, Sofia saw a flicker of hope in them. "Because of you." Sofia blinked, caught off guard. "Me? Yes." He nodded slowly, his voice quieter now. "I have been watching you for some time. When I arrived, I sensed your presence. Your strength. You are different from the others. You understand what it means to fight for something greater. To risk everything. I knew you could help me, keep my secret, protect me from those who would destroy us both." Sofia recoiled slightly. "You've been watching me? How? For how long?" Thaler's face clouded. "Before I arrived, I studied Earth, its inhabitants, its ways. I did not know if I could trust anyone, but something drew me to you. Your courage, your intellect, you question everything, even the things that are not meant to be questioned. You would not easily accept a lie." The room fell into another stretch of silence as Sofia processed his words. She had never thought of herself as someone special, just a woman doing her job, asking the tough questions. But Thaler's confidence in her was overwhelming. She could feel the weight of his gaze as if he was searching her very soul. "I don't know how I can help you," Sofia admitted softly, her voice trembling. I'm just a journalist. I write stories. This is beyond me. Thaler's gaze softened, and for the briefest of moments, there was a flicker of something resembling peace on his face. Sometimes, the smallest of actions can change the course of everything. You do not have to understand all at once. Just know that I need you. And as long as you are willing to help, I will protect you in return. The sincerity in his words was so deep, so heartfelt, that Sofia found herself unable to refuse. Despite the uncertainty gnawing at her, she felt a strange connection to him, as if their fates had already been intertwined long before this moment. But she knew, she could feel it in her gut, that what she was about to do could change everything. Could change her. The sound of something sharp scraping against the ground interrupted her thoughts. Thaler's eyes immediately narrowed, his entire body tensing as if every nerve was on high alert. Sofia's breath hitched. What is it? Who's there? Thaler's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. They have found me. A chill ran down Sofia's spine as she realized just how real the danger was. The prince from another world wasn't just a visitor, an alien lost in the vastness of the universe. He was hunted, and now, so was she. Stay close to me, Thaler commanded, his eyes flashing with a warning. Do not make a sound. Do not draw attention. Sofia's pulse quickened as the footsteps grew louder outside, each step more deliberate than the last. Whoever, or whatever, was coming for him, they were closing in. And now, they were coming for her too. Sofia's heart raced, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of everything that had happened in the past few hours. Her calm, logical life had been turned upside down, and now, with footsteps approaching her door, she felt an adrenaline surge unlike anything she'd ever experienced before. Thaler stood at the window, his back to her, his posture rigid and tense. His eyes scanned the darkening landscape, the violet of his irises now glowing faintly in the dim light. It was clear he wasn't just an alien prince on the run. He was a man who had survived countless dangers, one who had faced impossible odds before. But this time, Sofia knew, it wasn't just his life at risk. It was hers too. Who are they? Sofia whispered, moving cautiously to his side. She could feel the weight of the question hanging in the air. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, they weren't human, and they weren't here for a friendly chat. Thaler's lips tightened. He lowered his voice, speaking in a low, urgent tone. They are from a faction called the Eryxians. They are merciless hunters who track down those who escape their rule. I have seen their kind before, and they will stop at nothing to bring me back. Sofia's stomach churned as the realization hit her. They're not going to stop, are they? No, Thaler replied flatly, his expression hardening. Not until they have what they want. And if they discover you helped me, they will come for you too. The footsteps outside stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the house. Sofia could hear her own heartbeat thumping in her ears, the pulse of fear flooding her veins. Her hand instinctively reached out to Thaler, and for a moment, he looked down at her touch with something like surprise, before his face softened. I don't want to drag you into this, Thaler said, his voice low but steady. But if they find you, if they learn who you are to me, they will have no mercy. You are no longer just a journalist, Sofia. You are part of this now. And if they take you, his voice trailed off, and Sofia could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt he felt for involving her in this mess. But Sofia shook her head, her grip tightening on his arm. I don't care about that. I care about stopping them. If we don't act now, they'll get you, and they'll hurt you. We can't just hide. Thaler studied her for a moment, the weight of his emotions flickering across his face. Then, he nodded, the decision made. You're right. In a flash, he turned, his eyes darting to the door. His hand reached into the folds of his armor, pulling out a small device. It looked like a sleek metallic bracelet, but when he activated it, a holographic map of the surrounding area projected into the air between them. This is the safest route, he said, pointing to a small trail that led into the woods behind the farmhouse. The Eryxians will likely come through the front door first, but we can slip out the back, head for the woods. It will be harder for them to track us there. But we must move quickly. Sofia nodded, her mind racing. She had never been trained for something like this, never had to think so fast. But Thaler's confidence and the way he handled the situation gave her a strange sense of calm. For a brief moment, she could almost believe that everything would be okay if they just followed his lead. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady despite the rising panic inside her. Without another word, they moved swiftly through the house, the silence between them now broken by the sound of their footsteps as they navigated the dark hallway. The back door creaked open, and the cool night air rushed in. The shadows of the woods loomed ahead like a safe haven, yet something about the deep darkness unnerved Sofia. Still, she didn't hesitate. As they crossed the threshold and into the woods, Thaler's heightened senses seemed to guide him. His movements were fluid, purposeful, while Sofia struggled to keep up, her breath coming faster in the chilly night. They moved through the underbrush silently, the trees providing them cover, but Sofia couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on them. That danger was closer than she had ever been prepared to face. "I know it's hard to believe, but you need to trust me," Thaler said, his voice barely a whisper as they pushed through the dense foliage. Sofia nodded, focusing on the path ahead. Her heart was still pounding, but she felt something shift inside her. She had made her choice. Whatever it was that was between her and Thaler, whatever danger awaited, she would face it. She couldn't walk away. Not now. They walked in tense silence for what felt like hours, the only sounds being the rustle of the wind through the trees and the occasional snap of a twig beneath their feet. But the deeper they ventured into the woods, the more intense Sofia felt the change in the air. The hum of the earth beneath her seemed to intensify, and she swore she could almost feel the pull of something, a force, connecting her to the prince beside her. Thaler stopped abruptly, his hand on her arm to steady her. He motioned for her to be quiet, his eyes scanning the surrounding darkness. Sofia strained her ears, listening intently. She could hear them now, the faintest sound of movement. Something, or someone, was out there, and it wasn't just the wind. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She had to fight the urge to panic. Thaler's hand gripped hers tighter, and for the first time, she realized how desperate the situation had become. "Stay close," Thaler murmured. "We have to keep moving. They're closing in." Suddenly, the unmistakable sound of a ship's engine thrummed through the air, a low, vibrating hum that sent a wave of dread rushing over Sofia. The Eryxians had found them. Thaler's eyes flashed, determination hardening his features. "Run!" Without a second thought, they dashed deeper into the woods, the chase now on. The ground beneath Sofia's feet seemed to disappear with each frantic step as she and Thaler raced deeper into the woods. Her breath was ragged, the cold night air stinging her lungs, but she pushed herself harder, driven by the sound of their pursuers. The hum of the Eryxian ship grew louder, vibrating through the earth as though the very trees were whispering of the coming danger. "Stay close," Thaler urged, his voice sharp and focused. He moved with the grace of someone who had been trained for this kind of life. A life of running, hiding, surviving. He glanced back over his shoulder every few moments, his violet eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the Eryxians. Sofia's legs burned from the exertion, but she didn't dare slow down. She could feel the weight of the pursuit in her bones, could almost sense the cold, merciless eyes of the hunters on her back. It was as if every step she took was another step closer to a fate she wasn't ready to face. "Thaler," she gasped, her voice barely audible over the rustling of the trees. How do we get away from them? We can't outrun a ship." He glanced at her, his expression grim. "We're not running from the ship. We're running from the soldiers they'll send out to track us. They can't detect us on the ground, but they can't stay in the air forever." Sofia's mind spun. "You mean, they'll be searching for us on foot? Through the woods?" Thaler nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Yes, But they won't stop until they find me. And they'll use every tool at their disposal. As if on cue, the air was suddenly pierced by a sharp, mechanical shriek. The unmistakable sound of something large descending rapidly. Sofia's pulse quickened as she turned to see a dark shape cutting through the air above them. The ship. It was descending, much closer now, casting a long shadow over the forest. Its engines flared, the cold blue light of the craft illuminating the trees below. "We're running out of time," Thaler muttered, his voice taut with urgency. He grabbed Sofia's arm, pulling her toward a narrow, winding path that seemed to disappear into the heart of the woods. "This way. We need to reach the creek. There's a cave system there. It's our best chance." Sofia didn't question him. She just followed, her mind focused entirely on the escape, her feet barely touching the ground as she dashed behind him. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to find cover, to hide. But in her gut, she knew there was no escaping this. Not without Thaler, and there was no way she could abandon him now. The ship above them roared to life again, its searchlights cutting through the trees, sweeping back and forth in search of their target. Sofia could feel the heat of the beams as they passed overhead, blindingly bright in the darkness. She stumbled slightly, nearly losing her footing, but Thaler was always a step ahead, his hand steady on her arm, guiding her with the precision of someone who had faced danger countless times. They reached the creek, the sound of rushing water growing louder. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, and the cool mist of the water clung to their skin. The ground was slick with moss and mud, but Thaler seemed to know exactly where to step. He led her down the creek, following its winding path deeper into the woods, where the light of the ship would never reach. After what felt like hours of running, they finally reached the entrance to the cave system. It was hidden beneath the thick canopy of trees, a narrow opening barely visible unless you knew where to look. Thaler didn't hesitate. He ducked inside, pulling Sofia along behind him. As soon as they were through, he sealed the entrance with a piece of bark from a nearby tree, covering it so expertly that Sofia wasn't even sure how he had done it. They were in total darkness now, save for the faint glow of Thaler's eyes. The sound of the creek was distant, muffled by the thick stone walls around them. Thaler led her deeper into the cave, his steps careful and deliberate. Sofia could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on them. Her heart was still racing, her body trembling from the adrenaline of their escape. She wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, but her voice felt small, insignificant in this place. "How long do we stay here?" she whispered, her voice barely breaking the stillness. Thaler didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be listening intently, his eyes flickering with an inner light as if he were attuned to something beyond her understanding. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and urgent. "As long as it takes. The Eryxians are patient. They'll search for us, but if they don't find us immediately, they'll leave. They can't afford to waste resources. We just have to wait until they move on." Sofia sank to the cold stone floor, feeling the weight of everything pressed down on her. Her mind was reeling with thoughts of what had just happened, of the alien prince who had come to Earth seeking refuge, and of the hunters who were closing in on them. But one thought kept repeating itself in her head, louder than the rest. She was part of this now. There was no turning back. "How did you end up on Earth?" she asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Why come here?" Thaler's gaze softened, though the weight of his past still lingered in his eyes. He sat beside her, folding his long legs beneath him in a graceful motion that betrayed his alien nature. He didn't seem tired, not the way she felt. It was as though his body had long ago learned to exist without rest. "My world, it is at war," he began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of conflict. "Our people have been fighting for control of our planet for generations. The Eryxians are a faction of mercenaries, hired by those who seek to dominate Zelaris. They believe that if they capture me, they will have control of our world. They want to force me to fulfill my role as prince, to marry the woman they chose for me and unite our kingdoms. But I cannot, Sofia. I cannot live that life." His words hung in the air, full of quiet desperation. Sofia looked at him, seeing him not as the prince from another world, but as a person. Someone who had been pushed to the edge by forces beyond his control. I ran because I want to be free, he continued. I thought Earth would be a place to hide, a place where I could start over. But now they've found me. Sofia's heart ached for him. She wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but the words didn't seem enough. Instead, she just nodded, understanding the weight of what he was carrying. We'll make sure they don't take you, she said, her voice fierce now, a newfound determination taking root inside her. We'll fight back. Thaler looked at her, a flicker of admiration in his violet eyes. For the first time since they had met, he smiled, a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was enough to change the air between them. We will, he said, his voice steady. But be prepared. The Eryxians don't give up easily. As the sound of their pursuers' search faded into the distance, Sofia realized that their fight was just beginning. And no matter what it took, she wasn't going to let Thaler face it alone. The cave was colder now, the chill seeping into Sofia's bones as the hours wore on. She had long lost track of time, her mind spinning with the weight of everything she'd learned. But amidst the tension, something new had begun to form between her and Thaler, a quiet understanding, a bond that seemed to transcend the strangeness of their situation. Thaler sat across from her, his eyes closed as if listening to something beyond the cave's walls. His heightened senses, she knew, were always alert, constantly scanning the world for threats. For a moment, Sofia wondered how it must feel to live a life constantly on edge, knowing that enemies could be lurking around any corner, always one step away from capturing you. She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts aside. They couldn't afford to be weighed down by fear. Not now. So, tell me about Zelaris, Sofia asked, breaking the silence. Her voice sounded small in the stillness of the cave, but Thaler's gaze snapped open, his attention fully on her. What's it like there? What's your life like, back home? Thaler's eyes softened, a wistful look crossing his features. He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful, as though weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. Zelaris was once a place of peace, of prosperity, he said, his tone distant, like a man lost in memories. Our people lived in harmony with nature, with the stars. The sky was always clear, the sun warm on our faces. My ancestors were great leaders, not rulers, but protectors of our land. We had no need for war, not until the Eryxians came. Sofia listened intently, her heart aching as she imagined a world so different from her own. A world where peace had once reigned, where things had been simple, untainted by the violence and pursuit they were now trapped in. What happened? Sofia asked quietly. The Eryxians, they sought power. They saw our peace as weakness. They wanted control, and they would do anything to take it. At first, they came as traders, offering technology, promising prosperity in exchange for resources. But they had a different plan in mind. They manipulated the leaders of my people, turned them against each other. They used lies, manipulation, and bloodshed to weaken us. Thaler clenched his jaw, a shadow crossing his face. Sofia could see the pain there, the weight of the conflict that had torn his world apart. And you, she said softly, you didn't want to be part of that. Thaler looked up, his gaze intense. I never wanted to be a pawn in their game. I was raised to lead, to unite our people, but not at the cost of everything I believed in. I couldn't stand by and watch my world crumble under the rule of tyrants. So, I ran. His voice cracked slightly, and Sofia could see the raw emotion beneath the calm exterior. For a prince, he carried a burden far heavier than she had ever imagined. His rebellion wasn't just against the Eryxians. It was against everything his people had built, against the very destiny that had been imposed upon him. Sofia felt a pang of sympathy, but she also understood something more. Thaler wasn't just running from the past. He was fighting for a future where he could be free to choose his own path. And that future, as terrifying as it was now in her hands as well. The sound of movement outside the cave snapped her from her thoughts. Thaler was on his feet in an instant, his senses alert, his hand brushing against the stone wall as he pressed his ear to it. Sofia held her breath, every muscle in her body taut as she waited for any sign of what was happening outside. He turned to her, his expression grim. They've begun their search. Sofia stood quickly, feeling a surge of adrenaline course through her. What do we do now? Thaler's gaze flickered toward the narrow entrance of the cave. We wait for them to pass. But we can't stay here long. They'll track us down if we don't move soon. He paced back and forth, his mind working through the next steps, his body still and focused despite the danger. Sofia, too, knew they had little time. They needed to keep moving. Staying in one place for too long was a death sentence. But just as she opened her mouth to suggest a plan, the ground beneath them trembled. The cave rumbled as though the earth itself had come alive, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the air. The tremors intensified, and Sofia instinctively grabbed the wall for balance. What's happening? She gasped. Thaler's face hardened as he turned to her. They've found something. Something that isn't us. The cave shuddered again, this time more violently, and the ground beneath Sofia's feet gave way. The walls cracked, and dust poured down from above as the narrow passage began to collapse. Panic rose within her as she realized what was happening. The Eryxians weren't just hunting them. They were destroying everything in their path. Thaler! Sofia cried out, stumbling backward as rocks tumbled around them. He moved to her in an instant, his hand grabbing hers and pulling her toward a deeper passage. We need to go now. Sofia's heart pounded as she followed him, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The cave was collapsing behind them, the sounds of the destruction growing louder, drowning out everything else. They had to move faster. They had no choice but to push forward. As they rounded a corner, a new sound filled the air, a low, mechanical whirring. Sofia froze, her eyes wide in disbelief as a glowing light began to flicker from the depths of the cave. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, angular shape with glowing, ethereal eyes. A figure that was neither entirely human nor entirely alien. The Eryxians had found them. Thaler moved between Sofia and the newcomer, his posture defensive. Get back, he ordered, his voice low and commanding. But the figure didn't flinch. It tilted its head, its eyes narrowing as it focused on Sofia. You're not like the others. Sofia's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't speaking in any language she knew, but the meaning was clear. This wasn't just a soldier, it was someone with purpose. Thaler stepped forward, his hand glowing faintly with some kind of energy, preparing to defend them both. But Sofia stepped up beside him, her own instincts taking hold. What do you want? She asked, her voice trembling but firm. The figure seemed to consider her for a long moment before it spoke again, its voice cold, robotic. We want the prince. But you, it said, its gaze shifting to Sofia. You are more than you seem. The words echoed in the cave, the tension thick as stone between them. Sofia's heart hammered in her chest, the air around her suddenly too tight, too oppressive. The figure in front of them, this Eryxian soldier, wasn't like the others she had imagined. Its features were sharp, its eyes glowing a deep shade of red, almost as if they were alive with an unspoken message. Thaler stood rigid, his gaze fixed on the figure, every muscle in his body tensed for a fight. But there was something about this moment, something about the way the soldier spoke, that made him pause. We want the prince. But you, the Eryxian repeated, its voice almost mechanical, as if it were processing something it didn't fully understand. You are more than you seem. Sofia took a slow, steadying breath. She glanced at Thaler, but he didn't meet her eyes. He was still, calculating. Sofia's own instincts were screaming at her to run, but something about this situation felt wrong. This wasn't just a soldier after Thaler anymore. This was something else. What do you mean, more than I seem? Sofia asked, her voice steady but betraying her uncertainty. She stepped closer to Thaler, her eyes never leaving the figure. The Eryxian shifted slightly, as if trying to read her, as if something about her was puzzling it. "We know who you are," it said, its voice now carrying a hint of recognition. "You are not just a human. You are something else. A beacon." Thaler's eyes narrowed, a flicker of confusion passing over his face. He turned sharply to Sofia. "What is it talking about?" Sofia felt the ground beneath her tremble again, but it wasn't from the collapsing cave. It was something else, a rising, insistent energy inside her, a strange hum that resonated through her bones. She swallowed hard, trying to ignore the rising panic in her chest. "I don't know," she said, her voice a little weaker now, though she tried to keep her fear from showing. "What do you mean a beacon?" The Eryxian's glowing eyes focused on Sofia, unblinking. "You are the key," it intoned, its voice now distant, as though it were speaking from somewhere far beyond them. "The last of your kind. You were chosen." Sofia blinked, her pulse racing. "Chosen for what?" she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Before the Eryxian could answer, the cave shook violently once more. The air turned thick with dust, and stones began to fall from the ceiling. It was no longer safe in the cave, but Sofia couldn't move. Her mind was reeling, the words from the soldier hanging in the air, spinning like an inescapable web. "We have no time for this," Thaler snapped, his voice urgent. He reached for Sofia's hand, pulling her back toward the deeper passage. "We need to get out of here." But the Eryxian moved forward, blocking their path, its glowing form casting long shadows along the cave walls. "You cannot escape," it said, its voice growing more insistent. "She has already begun the awakening. There is no turning back now." Sofia felt a shiver run down her spine. She looked at Thaler, her eyes wide with fear. "Thaler, what's happening? What does it mean by awakening?" Thaler hesitated, his expression unreadable. Then, for the first time since they'd met, Sofia saw something different in him. Not the cold, distant alien prince, but a man, vulnerable and exposed. "I don't know," he said quietly, his voice tight with frustration. "I've never seen anything like this before." The Eryxian stepped forward again, its eyes locked onto Sofia. "She doesn't remember, but she will." Suddenly, the walls of the cave shook once more, this time with greater force. The ground beneath them cracked open, and a deep, guttural roar echoed from the depths below. The Eryxian moved swiftly, its hands moving in fluid, almost graceful motions as it activated a device strapped to its wrist. The air around them shimmered, and Sofia felt an overwhelming pull, an invisible force tugging her deeper into the cave. "No!" Thaler shouted, his voice filled with panic. He rushed forward, his body glowing faintly with a strange energy that Sofia had never seen before. It was as if he were drawing power from the very air, his hand raised to shield her. "Get away from her!" But the Eryxian didn't flinch. It didn't even hesitate. It raised its hand, and in the blink of an eye, a bright, blinding light enveloped Sofia. She gasped, instinctively reaching for Thaler as the world around her seemed to disintegrate. The cave, the Eryxian, and even Thaler all seemed to blur into the background, replaced by a flood of images. Flashes of distant stars, of strange landscapes, of ancient cities, and a face she almost recognized. It was hers, but it wasn't. Not exactly. A surge of energy erupted inside her, so overwhelming and powerful that she staggered backward, falling into Thaler's arms. Her mind spun, her body shaking as if caught in a storm. The light faded, but the humming sensation in her body only grew stronger. "What did you do to her?" Thaler demanded, his voice frantic as he held Sofia up, his hands steadying her. The Eryxian stood still, its expression unreadable. "You have awakened her, Prince," it said coldly, its voice devoid of emotion. "She is not just human. She is something far older, something far more powerful. She is the last of the Telsari. The key." Sofia's head spun, her mind racing to make sense of what had just happened. The Telsari? The key? The words reverberated in her mind, but the meaning remained elusive. Who? What are the Telsari? She whispered, still trying to grasp the enormity of what was unfolding. Thaler's gaze flickered with a mix of surprise and disbelief. The Telsari were an ancient race, he said slowly, his voice quiet but filled with wonder. A race that existed long before my people, long before the Eryxians. They were believed to be extinct, wiped out in a great war. But their power, it was said to be unmatched. Some say they could control the very fabric of the universe. Others say they could bend time itself. But none of it was ever confirmed. Sofia's breath caught in her throat. You're saying, I'm one of them? Thaler's eyes met hers, and for the first time, he didn't look at her like a stranger. He looked at her as if he were seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her. I don't know what you are, Sofia, he said, his voice full of awe and confusion. But you are something extraordinary. The cave was silent now, the only sound the distant rumbling of the earth and the quickened breaths of Sofia and Thaler. Sofia's mind raced, her thoughts spiraling in 1,000 different directions. The last of the Telsari. The key. The words echoed in her mind, growing louder with every passing second. She didn't know what to believe anymore. She had thought she was just a woman living a simple life on Earth. Now, she was something entirely different. Something ancient. Something powerful. Thaler's grip tightened on her shoulders, steadying her as her legs wavered beneath her. His touch was both comforting and alarming, as if it tethered her to something she had no choice but to face. You don't have to do this alone, Sofia, Thaler said quietly, his voice full of conviction. Whatever this is, I'll help you understand it. You're not just the key to my survival. You're the key to something much bigger. We both are. Sofia looked up at him, her eyes wide with uncertainty. But what if I don't want to be the key? Her voice cracked as she spoke the words, the weight of responsibility already pressing down on her chest. What if I don't want this power? I never asked for it. I never wanted any of this. Thaler's gaze softened, his expression filled with empathy. I understand, he said, his voice gentle. But you don't have a choice. Not anymore. Sofia clenched her fists, the humming energy inside her making her feel like she was on the edge of something far beyond her control. Every part of her wanted to run, to escape, but there was nowhere to go. She had already been pulled into something much bigger than herself, and the Eryxian soldier standing before them, unmoving and cold, reminded her of just how dangerous it all was. Tell me more, she said, her voice low but filled with determination. Tell me what the Telsari really are. Why did they go extinct? The Eryxian seemed to hesitate, as though deciding how much to reveal. Then, it spoke, its voice even and mechanical, but with a strange reverence. The Telsari were a race of beings that transcended physical limitations. They were the first to unlock the secrets of the universe, bending the laws of reality to their will. They were gifted with the power to manipulate energy, to alter time, and to communicate across vast distances. They were so powerful, in fact, that they became a threat to the balance of the galaxy. Sofia's mind spun at the implications of those words. To manipulate time? Was that even possible? They were hunted, the Eryxian continued. Not just by the Eryxians, but by others, by those who feared what they could become. In their desperation to survive, they attempted to hide their power by scattering themselves across the universe. But one among them, the last of their bloodline, knew that only by preserving their knowledge could the Telsari legacy survive. Sofia's heart skipped a beat. And that's me? I'm the last one? The Eryxian's eyes flickered with something akin to recognition. Yes, you are the last of the Telsari. The key to unlocking their power. The one who will either restore their legacy, or destroy it completely. A chill ran down Sofia's spine. She had no idea what to do with the information. Her entire life had just been turned upside down. And now she was supposed to decide the fate of a powerful, extinct race? It was too much. She wasn't ready for this. Thaler stepped closer to her, his presence like a steady anchor in the storm of confusion. I don't have all the answers, Sofia, he said softly, his voice filled with an unwavering resolve. But I know one thing. You don't have to carry this burden alone. I'll help you. I'll stand by you. Together, we can face whatever comes. For a moment, Sofia just looked at him, her breath shaky but her gaze unwavering. She wasn't sure if she could believe him, or if she could trust herself. But in this chaos, in this tangled mess of fate and destiny, the one thing that felt certain was Thaler's presence. I don't want to destroy anything, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. I just want to survive. I just want to know who I am. Thaler nodded, his eyes full of understanding. And you will. But we need to go now. The Eryxians won't stop, and they'll stop at nothing to take you. To take us. Sofia looked back at the Eryxian soldier, still standing motionless in the cave entrance. She knew it was a threat, but it didn't seem as menacing anymore. It wasn't there to kill them. At least, not yet. The soldier spoke one final time, its voice chillingly calm. You cannot escape what is destined. The Telsari will rise again. The choice is yours, Sofia. You must decide what side you are on. A flash of light filled the cave, brighter than anything Sofia had ever seen, and the world around them began to shift. Sofia's heart raced. What's happening now? Thaler didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her hand firmly, pulling her toward the deeper shadows of the cave. We move now, before they trap us. It's the only chance we have. As they ran, the light grew brighter, seeping through cracks in the stone, pulling them toward something. Something that felt both terrifying and inevitable. It wasn't just the Eryxians they had to escape anymore. It was the universe itself, with all its ancient secrets and all its darkness. Sofia could feel the pull of her destiny, the Telsari blood awakening inside her, rising to meet the storm. But she didn't know what that meant yet. She didn't know if she was ready to accept it. But Thaler's hand in hers was a lifeline. And for now, that was enough. They reached the farthest end of the cave, the walls steeped in shadows, as a low hum vibrated through the earth beneath their feet. Sofia could feel it now, the power inside her, growing stronger, awakening with each step. The ground quaked again, but this time, it wasn't just the Eryxians that were after them. It was the legacy of a race long gone. A legacy that would change everything. And somewhere, deep within her, Sofia knew the truth. The universe had already chosen her. She wasn't just running from the Eryxians. She was running toward her future. Toward something much bigger than she could comprehend. And she had to face it, no matter the cost.